It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Cool.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege to interview the Daily Dribble Sports Talk. How are y'all doing today?
Yeah, we're very good, Brandon. Thanks for having us. Glad to be on your show. And it's been a fair bit of basketball news lately. So yeah, we've got a lot to talk about.
Can you talk about how you came up with having a sports podcast?
Yes, certainly. So I know myself, I started the podcast, it was about 12 months ago. And before that, I'd created an Instagram page and had done a little bit of sports blogging. But from there, kind of wanted to transition into more of the speaking side of things. So started the podcast, a couple of weeks in, realized I needed a couple of co-hosts. So I recruited Rowan Lee here. So we're about 12 months in now and absolutely loving the experience.
Can you talk about how you knew that you wanted to come up with the name, the Daily Dribble?
Yeah, certainly. So it was, I guess, when I was doing the blogging side of it before I started the podcast, it was something I wanted to do daily. And then the dribble side of it just tied in with the basketball play on words there. So, yeah, it was a name that hadn't really been taken or explored. So I thought I'd kind of make it my own and run with it.
What are some things that you cover in your Sports Talk podcast?
Yeah, so I think a few things that we cover in the podcast, basically what's happened in the last week of basketball. We're sort of there for those who haven't been able to keep up to date with, the ever present, news that's happening in the NBA. So, but we're also, I'm brothers with Lee and I'm good mates with Nick as well. So we also have a bit of chat and a bit of banter, and it's never too serious. It's always just a bit of fun. Talking about basketball, which we all love talking about. So yeah, it's very, very good times when we get to do the podcast on the Saturday.
What are some of the segments that you have on your podcast?
Well, the one we start off with odds and ends. So just the news that has happened around the week. We go on to usually do. It's a pretty versatile, isn't it? It could be anything from a quiz to a debate. And then usually we end off with just a quick little fun segment. Right now we're running with Entertainment Weekly, so we give our favorite TV shows and music and movies at the time.
Yeah, we usually alternate the main segment because we don't want it to be the same predictable show each week. So sometimes we have a segment called Hero of the Week where we choose someone who's done something hero worthy throughout the week. It just really does rotate on a weekly basis. But I guess odds and ends are our main opening segment that we run with, just so we can get everyone up to date on the last week's worth of basketball news.
Absolutely.
Can you talk about how you've covered the NBA draft as it just wrapped up?
So actually, we're about to do a bit of a recap. Just after this interview here, we're about to record our weekly episode and do a bit of a discussion about the draft. Our social media channels have been quite active during the week, keeping people up to speed with what's been happening. In our episode about to drop, we'll do a bit of a deep dive into that one. So looking forward to that.
With the NBA draft just wrapped up, who are some of your bigger takeaways from that draft?
For me, I think the big one was Tyrese Halliburton that the Kings got. I was really surprised he slipped as far as he did, and I think he'll be a great accompaniment for De'Aaron Fox, who, just as we came on air, got his massive Supermax extension. So I think they'll be a pretty dynamic backcourt.
Yeah, and I guess from me, I really liked Okongwu at number 6 to the Atlanta Hawks. A big defensive, versatile player who is going to help them because they've been struggling really bad on defense, particularly last year. So he's going to improve the Atlanta Hawks on that side of things. And he's been getting comparisons to Bam Adebayo. So I think that's very promising from an Atlanta Hawks fan's perspective.
And as a Wizards fan, I was very happy to get Denny. I reckon he's going to be similar to, I'd go KP mixed with Jokic, hopefully. I think he'll bring a lot of versatility to the Wizards, and I'm very excited to see how that pans out.
Was it a big surprise to y'all that LaMelo went to, of course, the Charlotte Hornets?
Yeah, I mean, he was either going to go 1, 2, or 3. We knew that. But I guess my only question is that how is he going to fit in with Terry Rozier and Devontae Graham? They've already got 2 guards there. I think he's going to be probably taking a bit of playing time off them and vice versa with those 2 as well. But I think his upside is enormous. So if he can reach his potential, he could turn that franchise around. But yeah, I guess to answer your question, it was a little bit surprising. I thought he may have even gone 2, but wasn't the case.
Who are some of the people that you have interviewed on your podcast?
So far we've only interviewed a couple. I guess we've had some of our friends on the podcast to give their basketball perspectives. We had a reality TV star here in Australia who's a very avid NBA fan. We had him on not too long ago. And we're also in the process at the minute of speaking to a couple of NBL players, Australia's professional league, getting them on board. But so far, yeah, we haven't had that many guests, but it's certainly something we're looking to expand into more.
Can you talk about the process, of course, on getting some of the people that you've interviewed, like the Australia NBA players?
Yeah, certainly. So I guess that's, building a connection with them, just having, building a relationship first. And then once we've got a bit of a rapport with them, being able to, be at the stage where we feel comfortable in asking them to come on our show. And so far, yeah, we've received fantastic feedback, and it's certainly, it's certainly expanding that area for us having guests on. So it's, we've just been lucky that everyone we've spoken to has been so warm and welcoming to it.
What are some of your future plans for the Daily Dribble?
Well, right now we are trying to grow the podcast locally, so down here in Tassie. But obviously we've just partnered with Intersport down here, so we'll obviously try and get a couple more sponsors and just not only grow it locally, I guess, but grow it globally. Yeah.
What is some more of your future plans whenever it comes to, of course, getting international fans?
So I guess, as Lee said, just to follow on from that, it's kind of going to have a knock-on effect here in Australia. NBL League, where we live, Tasmania, we've just got our professional basketball team who will be joining the league next season. So for us at the minute, we do have quite a, I guess you could say, a global audience. I think we've reached 25 countries so far, and it's just going to be about creating a better product and really setting ourselves apart from other podcasters, so that we are, I guess you could say, go-to guys for basketball. Mm-hmm. And that'll help in turn grow it locally and globally.
How does it feel whenever you know that you've reached over 25 countries?
It's a big achievement for us, really, because as most podcasters would know, you start off and you're pretty much your own listener. You might have a few friends and family listening, but apart from that, you're not well known at all. But reaching all these countries, it's really motivating for us to keep continuing. And we've had some countries that we never thought would listen to the podcast. I think the other day we said we had
Zambia.
Zambia from Zambia on the podcast. So it's reaching places that we never thought it would reach. But yeah, as a it's just really motivating to.
Can you talk about how it feels to get people from, of course, the United States where NBA is mainly at?
Yeah, so for us, that's really big. I know for ourselves, looking at our, I guess you could say, statistics, Australia and the US are our biggest kind of markets. And in terms of the US, what we like focus on the NBA as it is based over there, it's huge for us to be able to have listeners. And I guess a lot of our listeners we've built connections with, which is exciting as well. So it's certainly something we're going to look to continue to expand and hopefully, build on in the future.
What advice would you give upcoming future sports talk podcasts looking to get started?
I'll go.
Yeah.
My main thing that I've noticed is just at the start, don't get discouraged by the amount of listens you're getting, because everyone's going to start off with a small following, and to add to that, I'd also say just put out as much content as you can, because that's the main way that people are going to notice you and then in turn listen to the podcast.
100% agree.
What about you?
Right.
Yeah, so from my perspective, I would echo everything that Lee just said, because as we all know as podcasters at the start, we don't have many listeners, and at times it's hard to keep the motivation going to keep churning out these podcasts because you might not be getting many plays. But from our perspective, we've just churned them out on a weekly basis since we've started, even when the NBA went on break, just for the simple fact that we love talking about basketball. So it's not a huge chore regardless of if we're getting fans or not, and getting listens or not. So yeah, my main advice would be just to keep persisting with making the podcast on a weekly basis or a daily basis, whatever you're doing with your own podcast, because in the long term, if you're passionate about what you're doing, it'll pay off, and you'll start to see those new likes, new followers, new listeners come through as time goes on.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. The big thing is finding something you're passionate about and running with it. You certainly, some weeks you won't feel like doing it, especially if that passion's not there. So find something you're passionate about, run with it, and enjoy the process. Like I know for us, seeing growth and learning new things, like none of us had ever done anything like this before. It's been hugely exciting. So it's certainly something, if you want to do it, don't dwell on it. Just go for it, I reckon.
Where can my listeners find your podcast on at social media along with podcast platforms?
Yes, certainly. So we have very active social accounts. On Facebook, we can be found under Daily Dribble. Instagram, the Daily Dribble 23. We also have YouTube and Twitter accounts under the Daily Dribble. And in terms of podcasts, we're on all leading providers, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, any other podcast provider you have, we're under it. If you search the Daily Dribble, you will find us.
Thank you again for your interview, and best of luck with your podcast, The Daily Dribble.
Thank you, mate. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Brandon. Champion.
You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Facebook at Brandon Sports Talk, Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again for the owners of the Daily Dribble.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.